Welcome to the Why Factor, a chance to work out why we do what we do. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
Thanks for downloading this edition of The Why Factor, a programme that seeks to find out why we do the things we do. We hope you enjoy it and tweet about it using the hashtag BBC Why Factor.
It's oh so quiet.
I would say I prefer personally, I prefer the quiet environment, like the library or somewhere like with less people. I'm quite introverted, so I don't really like where the places with so many people at the same time, and then it's too loud and sometimes you don't feel like you belong to the group, and it's really annoying.
And then, it's nice and quiet.
BBC World Service. Today, introverts on the Why Factor. With me, Anu Anand. People like Anne, who we've just heard from, are quiet and softly spoken and labelled as introverts. But why do some prefer one-on-one company compared to others who crave crowds? How do introverts survive in an extroverted world?
You know, I'm really a raging extrovert. So I always feel when I'm talking about introversion, like I kind of need to come out and let you know that I am definitely a raging extrovert.
Lisa Kanzig earned her PhD in educational policy in the United States and is an expert on introvert learners, speaking frequently on the subject.
I think I'm one of the only researchers that I'm aware of looking at introverts and the ways in which they cope in the world and the strategies that they use to be successful who does identify as an extrovert. So for me, it often feels like I'm a bit of an anthropologist looking at another culture that's very different from the way that I think. And so I think it gives me a very interesting perspective.
So I'm going to take the self-assessment questionnaire. You just have to answer true or false, and then you get a score which either tells you on one end of the scale that you're very introverted or on the other end of the scale that you're very extroverted. So question number 1, when I work on projects, I like to have larger uninterrupted time periods rather than smaller chunks. No, I'm pretty much a deadline person. I like to cram it all in.
Myers-Briggs is basically a personality test that can tell you a variety of things sort of about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Question 3, in general, I like to listen more than I like to talk. That would be false. My instinct.
You know, you'll see Fortune 500 companies and many universities use that to do team building and to kind of understand people's, different traits.
Lisa may have been peering into the mental outlook of introverts since the 90s, but studies on them stretch back much further, with the work of personality types by German psychologist Carl Jung, published in 1921.
That was sort of the first time the terms introversion and extroversion were used, and it was very controversial and very groundbreaking. But I would say introverts are people of any age who really get their energy from within themselves and who often have sort of a running dialogue in their head going on, thinking before they're talking, like to have a little more time to think through things before they're commenting on them or answering a question, need some time to recharge their batteries by being by themselves and enjoy having alone time versus extroverts who are the exact opposite.
Question 4. People sometimes think I'm quiet, mysterious, aloof, or calm. False. Question 5. I like to share special occasions with just one person or a few close friends rather than big celebrations. False again.
The idea that introverts want to be by themselves all the time, that they're, not very friendly, or they don't want to be around other people, or they don't have any friends, or there's something to worry about. I've talked to a lot of parents who have worries if their child is more introverted. They're very concerned about them having friends and connecting at schools and things of that nature. And I think it's actually a difficult thing for many introverted, particularly children, to cope with that, thinking, that idea that, somehow there's something wrong with you if you're introverted.
A school in Bondo in Kenya, where there's been some interesting research on introvert teenage mothers returning to education after they've had a baby.
My name is Dr. Peter Aloka. I'm currently a lecturer at Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Technology in Kenya, and also the head of Department of Psychology and Educational Foundations. We did personality tests. Introverts, they struggled a lot with social adjustment compared to other categories of the personalities. They had a lot of challenges in trying to adjust to school environment because other students talk about them, they close up, they are just themselves. They find it quite difficult. Even sometimes responding questions in class sometimes can become a problem to them.
Sometimes that you feel you are odd one out. As in, we have challenges that we face. How a teenage mother can take care of a kid, because they see you as someone who is different from them.
I've faced so many challenges. Many people don't want to interact with me. As I try to interact with them, some try to avoid interacting with them. When I come back here, I do not feel to interact with anyone. Now I feel lonely.
Dr. Aloka's research confirms other studies on introverts feeling drained by constant interaction in class and reflects a growing backlash against collaborative learning, active classrooms, and group projects, and a return to more low-key and solitary study.
Already their personality puts them at a certain point of not wanting to really be with so many people. Now, if they are readmitted teen mothers, now it makes it worse. Now they have two things now. They are struggling to adjust because they are teen mothers, that is a tag on them. And they also have that introversion personality. So that puts them in a bad situation. Unlike the extroverts who, they talk freely and they easily cope. They are able to socialize well. They are able to get information from the teachers on how they can be helped. They are able to adjust. So I think we need to really do much more so that the introverts can also have their space.
Get ready, get funky for. It's a good job you came in because you're on there.
I've come to comedy night at the Spread Eagle pub in young and hip North London. It's a beautiful summer's evening. We're in a small venue above the pub. There are 5 performers and people are looking forward to a good night out. They've got their pints of bitter, their glasses of wine. A comedy night is exactly the kind of place you'd expect to be packed with extroverts, people who love the company of others, who feed off of socializing. And you'd expect comedians to be the most extroverted personalities of all. But you'd be wrong.
So may I just check, is anyone here single, married, or in a relationship? That's what I like to call inclusive crowd work. Nobody like that.
A large majority of comedians are actually introverts. My name is Jared Voley. I'm a comedian and I teach stand-up comedy at creativestandup.com. A lot of people think that they're extroverts just simply because we're on stage and we're talking to the audience as if, this is how we are all the time. And then when you get off stage, and I always feel like I let my audience down right after the show. I'm very outgoing and extroverted, and then I get off stage, and then all of a sudden, these people want to have a one-on-one conversation with me, and I'm not really socially adept at that. So there's this really awkward moment where people realize, oh, you're not exactly, extroverted like I thought you were.
But thank you for being, let me tell you something. I've been in this town for 2 hours, and I love you guys.
Why do you think introverts become comedians?
When you're on stage, when you're performing stand-up comedy, your weaknesses become a strength for you. And that is a really powerful thing for an introvert. So say if you're an introvert and you have a really hard time talking to girls, then the fact that that is difficult for you becomes one of your strengths on stage because you can then turn around and you can make light of it. So it becomes this really powerful way of drawing humor from your everyday life. Introverts are naturally very reflective people. We like to use our imagination. We like to wonder about things. We spend a lot of time thinking about the past or the future. So those kind of things are very good for writing comedy being that really self-reflective, looking at a scenario differently than other people would.
Question 6. I usually need to think before I respond or speak. Yeah, I think that's true. Question 7. I tend to notice details many people don't see. I think that's true. Question 8. If two people have just had a fight, I feel the tension in the air. Yeah, I think that's true. Question 9. If I say I will do something, I almost always do it. That's definitely true. I hate to disappoint people. Question 10. I feel anxious if I have a deadline or pressure to finish a project. Yeah, true.
If I continue to answer mainly true in this test, then I'm heading towards the introvert end of the scale. Although, as Jared is doing, introverts can learn and through practice appear to be extrovert. Much of the scientific research shows that your personality is genetic and more or less determined when you're born.
The neurotransmitters in the brain are longer for introverts than they are for extroverts. And so therefore, that's why introverts like to have more time to think and process information.
Our brains have a mix of over 60 neurotransmitters, chemicals that are largely the same from person to person, but with slight differences, which determine your tendency either towards introversion or extroversion.
Dopamine is really sort of known as the reward chemical, released in our systems in response to pleasures that we're anticipating. And so the more responsive your brain is to dopamine, like it is for extroverts, the more likely you are to go after quick rewards. You know, that could be anything from money to a new job to responding to a quick question in class. And so this being more than just sort of a difference in personality and much deeper than that to a difference in biochemistry.
It's kind of a belief from Asian people, from Vietnamese people. We think like if we're in a smaller group, then we can build a connection, we can build a relationship with people. It will be better. While when you are in a bigger group, then everyone tries to raise their voice, and then you cannot. The first thing is that you cannot raise your voice like properly, and the second thing is that you cannot build connection, cannot build relationship, like a really strong relationship with anyone.
An Lam explains that within Vietnamese society, being part of a smaller group helps build closer connections, and that this is the social norm.
We believe that if you build relationship with other people, and if the relationship is strong enough, then it will be better for you in your career, in your reputation, in your image and everything. So the more people, but the more relationship you build, the better you will be. That's what we believe.
Yet, in the West, although 1 in every 2 or 3 people are introverts, it is the extroverts who have, over time, come to dominate work culture, evident with the growth of open-plan offices, group thinking, and brainstorms. Lisa Kanzig and Jared Volley again.
I think there was a time in our history, for many, many years, in fact, where we really had a lot of reward for people who were thinkers. Philosophers, writers, and creators and discoverers were very valued. And those tend to be skills that introverts have in spades because they're willing to do a lot of research and a lot of thinking and be alone. And that's what you need to do in order to be a creative person who comes up with new ideas.
I do the vast majority of my work completely alone. My favorite aspect of my job is sitting down at my computer and just daydreaming about these stories that I love telling audiences. So that is where all the humor comes from, because that's where, all that magic is made. It's when you're sitting down and you're writing and you're generating all this new material.
In Kenya, following his study on teen mums, Dr. Oloko has made some recommendations to the school with a view to making life easier for introverts.
Introverts might find it easier working in groups, but with smaller groups, and they work in pairs with extroverts. I also recommended that the teachers should design a classroom for all the students to contribute. The introverts could be a better choice to compile the group findings and write a report and present the report. Wherever teacher is teaching a question in class, let them allow for wait time for students to process the information before answering the question, just for people to think through the question. Thinking, pairing, and sharing. Those three strategies will help the introverts to speak out.
What's good for introverts is also really good for extroverts. I think it's really good for extroverts also to take some time to think things through, to pull back from the group, to also have a little time to recharge. We all need that, regardless where we are, sort of on the introversion-extroversion spectrum, and to make sure that you're valuing people who are thinking carefully. I really worry when I walk into office spaces that are all open, and people just don't have any privacy or any time to sort of shut a door and, catch their breath without, feeling like people are coming up to them all the time. Being able to find ways to provide privacy, for all of your workers and setting a culture that respects careful thinking. And that's hard to do, but really important for everybody who's a part of that workplace.
Question 18. I am creative and or imaginative. True. Okay, so I'm just going to total it up. So I seem to be more extroverted, but it's surprising a little bit because I think I've fallen slightly in the middle.
That makes me an ambivert, someone whose personality falls more or less directly in the middle of the introvert-extrovert scale and shows traits of both. It's unlikely that a person is totally an extrovert or totally an introvert. Most, like me, are comfortable with groups and enjoy social interaction as well as time alone away from the crowd.
It's oh so quiet.
If you are further towards the introvert end of the spectrum, though, you're in good company, as Lisa Kanzig will tell you. We've come to the end of this week's Y Factor with me, Anu Anand. The producers were Priscilla Ngethe and Nina Robinson.
I think it's really important to celebrate, some amazing introverts. One near where you are, of course, is J.K. Rowling. Rosa Parks, of course, a major civil rights leader. She was willing to do something very brave and something very courageous because she had a very good sense of her own self, which is another major strength of introverts. They know who they are. Barack Obama, our president, is an introvert. Certainly some of our most creative problem solvers over time have been introverts.
If you'd like to hear other Y Factors, there are plenty to choose from, including pet viral videos, our perception of time, and Chili's. Why do we eat a food that burns?